That's better. Nice and comfortable. Oh, hello there. My name is Zach Jones. Don't I know you from somewhere? What's your name? Ah, yes, now I remember. Are you here to listen to my story? That's good. Are you sitting comfortably? Do you have your snacks with you? Have you got your teddy bears? That's good. Now then, time to read you all a story. The Last Wood Elf of Bavalon, Part 1. The last wood elf and dragon tamer of Bavalon, and the most powerful mage in all the worlds, Emrys the Great, walked through the forest of Elwine, leaning on his mage staff with his red and gold mage robes trailing behind him. It had been almost a century since he became the last of his kind. The Wood Elves had been destroyed in a war between their enemies, the Dark Elves. The war had raged for 5,000 years, and in the end, both races were destroyed, but only Emrys survived. Emrys reached the river that led to the Lake of Avalon. He looked down at his reflection in the water. He had dark black hair with a thick black beard that was slightly burned, scars and burns on his face, diamond blue eyes, and a handsome wood elf face. I guess it's just you and me now, he said to himself. Then he walked to a stone and sat down, because today was the anniversary of his great love, Freya's death. Emrys looked out as the sun began to set behind the hills. As the sun disappeared, it went dark and he was alone, as he had been since his people went extinct. Then he unrolled his sleeping mat, lay down and went to sleep. But he would soon have the same nightmare he has had for the past century and a half. Emrys ran across the eastern plains with his beloved Princess Freya by his side, along with the rest of the Wood Elves of Bavalon, and they charged head-on to their enemies, the Dark Elves, and their leader, Theros Dark-Bringer. It's getting scary now, people. Are you sure you can handle it? Well, good. The Dark Elves are as powerful as the Dark Ones, and allies of the Daedra. Their ambition was to bring darkness to Bavalon and rule over the realm. The armies crashed into each other, using elven and daedric blades and magic to fight each other with. 6 hours later, Emrys and Freya were the last of the army left, and Emrys stood to face Theros and his henchman, Philos Blood-Spiller. Freya was by his side as he drew his mage staff and elven sword. "Welcome, Emrys. I've waited many years for this moment," Theros crowed as Emrys stood there calmly. Then they charged at each other and began their battle. The battle raged for nearly 3 hours. Then Emrys heard Freya scream, but the next moment he awoke in the forest with sweat dripping down his forehead. Just the same nightmare, only this time it was worse, and I don't know why it keeps happening. Emrys muttered to himself. Then he lay his head back down as tears formed in his diamond blue eyes, as the scream he heard was what Freya made before she was stabbed through the heart by Philos. "Emrys," said a voice on the wind. The wood elf looked around, but saw nothing, and then he heard it again. "Emrys," said the The voice came from the river. He looked to see that drops of water were rising from the river. He watched curiously as the water became a bubble and a beautiful woman's face appeared inside it. "Who are you?" Emrys demanded as he watched the bubbles stop at his eye level. The woman looked at him calmly as he looked at her. "We mean you no harm, Emrys. We are the Vilia, spirits of the lakes, rivers, brooks and streams of Bavalon. We know where you are going, Emrys. We know you are going to the Lake of Avalon to find Freya. It wasn't your fault what happened to her," said the Vilia woman. Emrys felt his heart sink. He'd blamed himself for Freya's death ever since the end of the Elf War between his people and the Dark Elves. "How do you know about my beloved's death?" Emrys snapped. The Vilia woman looked at him calmly. "We helped Freya become the Lady of the Lake after her death, and we watched you give her the Avalon funeral. We helped her protect the waterways of Bavalon, and we wish to help you. We wish to guide you to the Lake of Avalon, where you can meet with Freya and see her again," the Vilia woman said to Emrys. He thought for a moment, then nodded his head in agreement. "I will make a boat of the journey to Avalon. Then will you guide me to the lake?" Emrys said to the Vilia. She nodded, and then Emrys stood up. Then, with a wave of his hand and a green flash of his eyes, a boat formed in the river, and Emrys climbed in. The Vilia woman began to lead him down the river, but she knew little that Emrys had looked into the water and entered the rest of his memory from a century and a half ago, where Freya had been held hostage by the Dark Elves, by the last Dark Elves left. "Freya! I'll kill you for this, Theros!" Emrys yelled, and he watched Freya fall to the ground. He raised his elven sword and mage staff to strike Theros. The Dark Elf blocked his strike. Then Philos charged at him with his Daedra blade drawn. But Emrys pointed his staff at him. "Snidus!" Emrys bellowed. The colour of his eyes flashed green, and a blast of bright green energy fired from his mage staff, and Philos was blown to ashes. Theros yelled in anger and slashed at Emrys. The Wood Elf blocked the strike with his elven sword and mage staff. Then Emrys kicked Theros in the side, and he fell to the ground. "Please, Emrys, don't kill me! Have mercy!" Theros begged as Emrys raised both his staff and sword above his head. He looked down at the Dark Elf. Then he slammed his sword and staff down into the Dark Elf's chest. His dark blood spattered Emrys's face, the ground, and Theros' armour. The Dark Elf leader looked up at Emrys as his blood poured from his mouth. "Goodbye, Theros. For good this time, old friend," Emrys snarled. Then the Dark Elf's head slumped back and he fell limp. "I told you it was going to get dark." Emrys ran to Freya. He knelt down and lifted her into his arms as her blood poured from her chest. He knew it was a Daedric blade, but he wanted to heal her. "We're not far from Avalon. If I can get you to the lake..." Emrys struggled to say as he lifted Freya up, but was forced to land on his backside with Freya in his arms. She put a hand on Emrys's shoulder as he tried to lift her up again. "Emrys, my love, please, just hold me," Freya said breathlessly. Emrys did what his beloved asked of him, and then he sat down while he cradled her in his arms, tears running down his scarred face and into his burnt beard. He looked down at Freya. Her long coal-black hair, blood-red lips, large emerald green eyes, and her upturned nose were what made her the most beautiful woman Emrys had ever known. Her blood had also stained her bright blue dress. The wound left a dark patch of blood stained on her chest, and her face had turned white from the amount of blood lost. "Emrys, I just wanted you to know, before I go, that you were the only one in all the worlds I've ever loved, and thank you for everything you've done." As Freya said those words, Emrys felt tears fall down his face, and he looked at Freya. "No, I'm not going to lose you. I can't live without you. I've got to save you," the Wood Elf said. But then Freya put her hand on his cheek and made him look at her. "You already have saved me. You showed me the worlds and made me feel loved. I promise you, Emrys, one day I shall repay you. I promise, my love," Freya said. Then she closed her eyes and fell limp in Emrys's arms. I told you this was going to get sad. Now, that is the end of part 1. Now, I will leave the link for part 2 down below. And also, I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for part 2. And also, stay safe and keep washing your hands. But other than that, enjoy yourself.